Another big day of explosive testimony. Whether it be today's hearing in Michigan, Monday in Arizona, or last week in Pennsylvania, the one inescapable point for Democrats is that even if you want to chalk up all of the glitches, the ballot errors, and other irregularities to simple mistakes, then why do they only go one way? Can anyone name a single time in which these mistakes helped President Trump? It's a simple question that has been raised time and again in the months since Election Day, without any good answers from Democrats. However, looking at records from the Federal Election Commission may explain at least part of the reason for this code of silence. What we find is that 95% of all political contributions made by employees at Dominion voting systems between 2014 and 2020 went for Democrats. It's the same story at Smartmatic. 86% of their employee contributions went to Democrat candidates, specifically to Joe Biden, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and even to Adam Schiff. Now, this comes despite Smartmatic's own website declaring, quote, Smartmatic's founders and employees adhere to a strict ethics code that, among other things, prohibits them from making political donations. So here you have Dominion, which is a foreign-owned company and uses computer chips made in China. And Smartmatic, which has ties to Soros and the Castro regime in Venezuela, involved in U.S. elections. At this point, many people are wondering where the Justice Department or the FBI is after days and days of credible testimony. Well, I'll tell you where the DOJ is. Just like Dominion and Smartmatic, over 85% of their employees' political contributions during this last election cycle went to Joe Biden. Attorney General Bill Barr telling reporters today that his department has found no evidence of widespread fraud that would have changed the outcome of the presidential election. Now, my question for Barr would be, is this the same department that also lied about Russian collusion for 4 years and then sat on its high horse in court for years against General Michael Flynn, claiming that it turned over every piece of exculpatory evidence, only to find out that they were sitting on documents showing how the general was entrapped by the FBI as a way to, quote, get Trump, according to those same handwritten FBI notes? Because if so, then I don't want to hear it. Since we're not going to get help from the top, it's up to us as American patriots to hold this constitutional republic together. To that point, a Dominion contractor from the TCF Ballot Counting Center in Detroit came forward to testify today before the Michigan State Senate Oversight Committee. And here's what she had to say.
What I witnessed at the TCF Center was complete fraud. The whole 27 hours I was there, there was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times. Also, the adjudication process, I witnessed numerous people walking up, claiming they were both Democrats, saying they were sitting together, judging ballots all night together, all day together. I witnessed it all. I was on the main stage with all of the city officials. Daniel Baxter was in on the whole thing, and I am under the impression 100% that at least 90% of those workers were all in on this. There was not a single ballot the whole night, the whole 27 hours I was there, that I saw that was for Donald Trump. Not one, not a single ballot. That is scary.
Her testimony corroborates that of another witness who claims that she observed ballots that were all for Biden and appear to be photocopies of each other. She claims many of these ballots were not cast by registered voters, so election staff manually inputted fake birthdays to override the system to have them counted anyway.
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter, and the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote, and none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters, of which I saw several that day. Throughout the day, that's how they would override voters that were neither in the electronic poll book or the supplemental updated poll book.
Thank you.
A third witness then described how these massive dumps of ballots arrived at the center in the first place, with trucks dumping them off at 4 in the morning after many of the Republican poll watchers had gone home or had been kicked out. It should also be noted that many of these Dominion voting machines were reportedly connected to the internet as well. Take a look at what that means.
So two of the main observations that I witnessed at the TCF Center on both the 3rd and the 4th when I was there, when I got down there on the morning of the 4th, I went back for an additional day because I witnessed so many irregularities when I was there on Election Day on the 3rd. Immediately upon walking in, I ran into Randy Bishop. And Randy owns the radio stations. He's very IT savvy. He said, Brian, I was here all night. What's going on here is unbelievable. He said, let me show you something right now before I leave. So he walked me over to the high-speed scanners and tabulators, and he said, see all these Ethernet lines running out of the tabulators? They're all bundled together as they accumulate, and then they're all connected to these routers, and then they all go to the main computer. He said, these are all hooked into the Internet, and that is illegal, and it should not be happening because it opens them up to hacking. So I was aware of that immediately.
Is that the reporting is done in decimal format. You can see this in the New York Times database reporting. You can see this with Dominion Voting Systems reporting. So this opens up the ability for hackers to potentially get into, or malicious actors who have admin rights, to get in and manipulate the votes through rounding errors in the reportage and other types of malfeasance. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Dominion Voting System itself. They can be the Trojan horses that are just allowing ballots to be manipulated by administrators that have access to the system.
And FEC filings show that when it comes to Dominion, for example, a lot of their employees, I believe it's over 85% or so, donate politically to Biden, or at least when it comes to political donations, about 85% or more go toward Biden or Democrats in general. Do you think that that's a conflict of interest?
Yeah, absolutely. Smartmatic, for example, has a policy not to allow employees to make political donations at all. And Dominion Voting Systems also makes 95% around donations to Democrats through its employees. And so one thing that I would like to point out is that just simply in the United States government as a whole, this tracks very consistently with what we see with numerous bureaucracies, with unions. So it all seems to be a monolithic sort of block of united interests that is very concerning to me. So when you have voting systems that are engaging in, or at least have questionable security policies that allow Democrats to potentially breach our election security, and it's very opaque, and our voters have no way of tracking it, then we have to raise questions about if there's some sort of shared interest in all of these organizations and companies together, just as a block, trying to make sure that Democrats have some kind of unfair advantage.
And we also heard from today in Michigan a woman who worked as a Dominion contractor on election night with the whole ballot counting process. And we heard from her, her testimony, and she claims that she saw some ballots were being recounted 8 to 10 times. What did you make of her testimony?
Well, Melissa Caruso was actually very outgoing and passionate about what she saw, and she's not out by herself saying that ballots were rerun through the tabulators over and over again. Now she says it was 8 to 10 times. That's really high. Obviously, it's very concerning. But just the fact that these vote dumps that have been coming in, Wayne County being one of them, in the early mornings of 140,000 with Trump voters getting almost nothing. This syncs with what they're saying about not seeing any Trump ballots. Like she said not one. But others have said, only saw 2, was another witness that said that. So these kind of rates just do not sync with the political landscape, even in inner cities where we saw with Trump, he had more minority support this election by 4 points for Latinos and also Black Americans. It's higher than it was. So these kind of rates are inordinately high and raise red flags.
When it comes to these ballot dumps, in Michigan alone, I believe there's over 6 different counties that were reporting voter turnout at over 100%, which of course is impossible. So meaning more ballots were coming in than there were registered voters eligible to vote that day. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the fact that these mail-in ballots, once the signatures are separated, the signed ballots are separated from the mail-in votes, then we have no way of knowing like how many of these votes are you cannot track them at all, and even the New York Times admitted this. So William Barr, several months ago, he pointed out that we are playing with fire with these mail-in ballots. So these